What's up, y'all? This is Bridgie from Bougie, Texas Barbecue, and today we're going to be smoking a chuck roast hot and fast. Tender beef, barked up to perfection. You're definitely not going to want to miss this episode, so let's get into it. To begin prepping my chuck roast, I'm going to add a binder and a seasoning. This is the seasoning I prefer to use when it comes to my Tex-Mex recipes, and this is the hot sauce I'm going to use today as a binder. Using a binder is definitely a preference, but since we are smoking these hot and fast versus low and slow, it will help build a pretty bark within the short amount of time that we're cooking today. And you don't necessarily need to use a Tex-Mex style rub. You can absolutely just use some SPG or your favorite beef rub. This is just a preference of mine. Just make sure the chuck roasts are fully covered and really well seasoned before you throw them onto the smoker. Today I'm using Oklahoma Joe's Bronco, and I'm gonna allow my chuck roast to do a quick dry brine while I get this heated up. Our target starting temperature is going to be 275 degrees. I did add some mesquite wood chunks, and this is just to enhance the Tex-Mex flavor. You can definitely use your wood preference. Just remember, we are smoking beef, so make sure it is a stronger wood like mesquite, hickory, or post oak. And here's a little pro barbecue tip. If you live somewhere where it's really dry, add a water pan. That is going to benefit you so much during this cook. After smoking my chuck roast for 3 hours at 275 degrees, it's time to braise. Braising the beef is not only going to help it cook faster, but it's going to make it super tender, and it's going to add so much flavor. Usually chuck roast doesn't really have too much marbling within the meat, so braising or wrapping is definitely a must. Now, my braising liquid is super easy and super flavorful. It's a combination of Chipotle peppers blended, beef broth, seasonings, bay leaves. Bay leaves are a must because they not only add flavor, but they also help prevent heartburn. And I prefer to use fresh oregano. You can definitely use Mexican oregano if you can't find any fresh. But don't worry, my ingredient list will be down below in the description, so make sure you check it out, and don't forget to save this video. Now that my chuck roast is back onto the smoker, I'm going to increase the temperature to 300 degrees and cook for roughly 2 hours or until pro tender. And sure enough, my chuck roasts were definitely probing super tender right at the 2-hour mark. Now, this is how it looks like after I rested it for about 45 minutes. I definitely understand that 5 hours is still technically kind of a long time to smoke meat, but normally it takes my chuck roast like 10 hours to smoke, and I got it done literally in half the time versus my traditional cooks on my offset smoker. And the thing with Oklahoma Joe's Bronco, the flavor is very similar to an offset, but it not only uses half the fuel, it runs itself. So once it's up to temperature, you don't have to be constantly managing the fire like you were on an offset. Now, don't get me wrong, I love my offset, but on days where I really don't want to be managing that fire or have other things to do, the Bronco is my go-to smoker / grill. Now it's time to shred. Make sure you have a cotton glove on, because even though this meat is rested, it's still pretty hot. And while shredding, the meat should have no resistance. It shouldn't feel tough. It should have a velvety, soft texture similar to pulled pork. This chuck roast is so similar to my low and slow style chuck roast. I don't think I'm going to go back to low and slow. Hot and fast is definitely the way to go when it comes to this recipe. If you're still on the fence about this recipe, don't worry, I got you. I left one chuck roast intact to show you how it comes apart with little to no pulling. Now that pretty much covers the basics on how to smoke a chuck roast hot and fast. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to strain the braising liquid, and I'm going to show you how I prep my chuck roast for a busy week. I decided to make burrito bowls as one of the recipes for this shredded Chipotle beef. If you're a busy parent like me, your child, especially if they're in sports, are always hungry. And I mean, come on, I'm always hungry, so I'm also going to benefit off of this. They are constantly nagging me for takeout food, especially after a sports game. This not only saves me time by just committing one day of smoking, it saves me so much money. I'm a family of 5, and just one takeout order is usually close to $100 or over $100. And I got all my ingredients for today's cook for under $100. Also, I wanted y'all to see how much meat I actually had left over, even though I made like these really big burrito bowls. Since we're talking about burritos, they are also another perfect on-the-go option if you have a busy schedule. You can make them a little bit healthier than this, but keeping it simple with rice, beans, meat, and cheese makes them freezer friendly as well. That's also why I do the fresh ingredients like the salsa on the side, because they only have a shelf life of 3 days. If you freeze the burritos, they will have a freezer life of 3 months, and they reheat so easily out of the freezer. You could pop them in an air fryer, pop them in the microwave, wrap them back in foil, throw them in your bag, and get going. Or you could just eat the meat for dinner and save the leftovers for days when you don't really feel like cooking. Either way, I know it's going to be delicious. Till next time, guys, enjoy.